And your friends will tell it to somebody else. So that story, same as the story that you would have listened to and read in the Bible, are stories that happened, but then not an actual, accurate historical report. That was mentioned by Father Mariano, that he said that the Bible is not a historical tool. It never is. It's never the intent of the Bible to become a historical tool. But rather, it was a book that expresses one's appreciation of God's human intervention in time. That God is true. That God came. That God intervened into human history. And how did they feel about it? That's what they wrote down there in the Bible that you have now. It is the human person reflecting on an event and how God intervened in that event and how he felt, what lessons he learned that he can pass on to the next generation. And first, he talked about it as a disciple, like Isaiah, he has some people that listens to them. And then eventually, they said, we better put it into writing so that future generations can think and reflect and feel in an accurate way how God have been part of our lives. So, the Bible came about. And it came in different years, in different times, in different stages in the human history. And some things are going on too, parallel to our human history. There's another story unfolding, the secular story unfolding on the side by side, as the Bible is written. And you can see now that in some ways, there is this relationship that we thought, oh, that's historical now. Yeah, because it happened. It was not a myth. It happened. So it's there. But there are also other parts of the Bible that you have to understand that it's physically impossible to write an accurate account. Can you cite one? Creation. Who was there at the time with a notepad? Okay, God, you did the light and the darkness. All right. Second, you did the land. Nobody was there at the time. Okay? So these are instances in the Bible that there's no witness. But it's a reflection of the priestly tradition and a farmer's tradition. The Elohist and the Yahwist tradition. You would go back there, not now, but later. This is a teaser, remember? So we're going to teach you to study more on this one. So those are the kind of parameters that I would like to share with you as a basic foundation when we look at the Bible, how we interpret the Bible, how we perceive what God tells us in the Bible. This is a divinely inspired book, written by human persons, divinely inspired by God. It contains a beautiful story. A story that spans in time. A story that is etched in love by a person who cares and loves us all. And in that story, he opened the door that people can grow, knowing their own limitations, their own weaknesses, their own strength, their own talents, their own skills, but he always accompanies them in their journey. We human beings are blessed with this person of God accompanying us through our growth, through our maturity. When we look at the salvation history, okay, before I go to the salvation history, before I forget, let me just offer to you this one. You may want, as I am talking to you on the salvation history, this is a very good reference to it. Is it okay for me to move away from the mic? Just okay. So, this is a very good tool. This is yours. So keep it, okay? And when you look at it, they are different. They are color. These are color coded. They are divided into different stages, biblical periods, as they are called, important periods in time, and each one of them are color coded so that you would know about it. The early world, the patriarchs, Egypt and Exodus, the wandering in the desert, etc., etc. And also it goes to the back. Okay? A beautiful note. This will really help you establish yourself a bearing on history, because there's the time. When you look at the time there's the time. Like, when did it happen? It's got to be like in the 12th century or something, or in 2500 BC, and then it goes down. By the way, as an added information, when you call BC, okay, before Christ. Okay, so it started. The oldest one is in thousands, and it gets smaller, smaller, and smaller until it reaches Christ. Like, for instance, Ezra, which is in the back page, is in the almost in the last part. That is 500 BC, and then Christ came, and then you would see that that's 3 AD to 30 something AD, and now we are AD. We are 2013 AD, Anno Domino. Okay? So you see, even history itself. So just look at this one, and I mean, as a guide, you have it all here. Then this is a timeline. It's a very good note, which you can look probably later. But as I'm talking, you can go back to this and probably trace, oh, that's why, this is what happened. So this will be a good guide where I am sharing with you the salvation history. I hope I'll be a little bit exciting about it. All right, now, with the salvation history, you know, I like to go and walk, move, kind of wander around. So bear with me. I hope you don't get dizzy along the way. But just in case you're getting dizzy, just wave a hand so that I will stand still for a little bit. All right? So I just want to make sure that I'm covering. And I have about another 20 minutes to go. Then we will cut it. Okay, for lunch. I want you to pass out. Especially those with diabetes and everything, you know. And we will resume it after about 30-minute break, and then we'll resume it again. I'll continue on. So, let me start now with salvation history. A beautiful history, as I mentioned at the beginning. And it is our story. It's not somebody else's story. We're included in this story. It is our story, our human story. And it's God's story. It's God interacting with each one of us. And we start this. I mean, let me just set the phase into two. For those of you who are writing down, there are two periods on this one. Before Christ, okay, and then during Christ. Which is, the first one is the preparation. The other one is fulfillment. Okay, so when you put the story of the salvation history, you put on the first side, there is before Christ, a time for preparation. And then on the other side is during Christ's time, a day or a time, a period of fulfillment. There is a prologue. The prologue is creation. When things are not happening yet, that is in the beginning. And I'm loving this. It's like a remote control. I'm the big guy here. I am the one with the remote control. You cannot change any of this, just me. But what a beautiful picture that is. That's a painting by Rembrandt. I don't know. It's an old Renaissance painting. But it's a painting about the Holy Trinity. You have to imagine that God is self-sufficient. Does He need us? No, He doesn't need us. The Holy Trinity is by itself a complete community, a complete person. God doesn't need any of us. But then, they are happy. They are contented. They have everything. And the love that exists among them is the one that creates them, that community of love. But because of that love, and love has always to be outward. Love has to diffuse. Is it the right word? Diffuse itself. That is what love is all about. Love doesn't reside in the person loving. It has to reside in another. It's an outward act. To love is an outward thing. It's never an inward thing. So when you look at love as like that, it's an outward thing. It is meant to be shared. It is meant to dwell in someone. That's what God is. That's why the Father loves the Son. And the love of the Father and the Son, the beauty of their relationship of mutual love for each other is animated by the third person, the Holy Trinity. The three persons in one God. They cannot be separated from each other because for them the community is about love. And God wanted to share His love outside that community. Now there's the separation of light and darkness. But this is like the series of what happened in creation. God, in His benevolence, shared the beauty of His life to us when He started with everything out of nothing. Take note of that. Creation out of nothing. There was not like there was some molecules already existing that He just fix it up and make something out of it. It was like a big, huge mass in space that blew away, that has created something like the Big Bang Theory. No, creation was from nothing. Nothing existed before. That's what God has created. Started with the light and darkness. Created the sun, the moon, the plants. Okay, forget about the left side. That's another Renaissance painting. No, forget about that. Don't think about that. Focus. It's a beautiful painting. Beautiful Michelangelo painting there that illustrates how God touches man. Because the life of man came from God. And in those 7 days that God has used, well, that is the interpretation of the tradition, is that there are 7 days that God made heaven and earth and the seas and the plants and everything else. The center, the crowning glory of God is the creation of man. And you know why? Because God created man according to His image and likeness. That distinguishes us from all the rest of creation that made us on the top of the pedestal. Because we are created unto the image and likeness of God. And no other being can share the same thing. Even our beautiful dogs and cats and pigs. Okay? We are all created unto the image and likeness of God. And God, when He created our first parents, Adam and Eve, we have the covenant. A covenant is an agreement, and it lasts forever. It is something deeper than a contract. A covenant involves the entire person. And in the story of our salvation history, we have 7 of those covenants. And the very first is the covenant of God with Adam, our first parents, Adam and Eve. But before we go to the fall, if you can see, that particular area where God has established that covenant with Adam, what he did was he told them and made sure that that relationship reflects in future relationships. Marriage is established during this time. When you go back, for those who are married, and you selected the reading, and in the book of Genesis, and that God said He created male, and He created a male and female, and when He created male and female, and they would say join together, and they would be separate from their parents so that they can be one. That is the first establishment of that covenant. God becomes their God, and Adam and Eve becomes His people. It is the marriage between God and man, and they would not have any other God other than Him. And the covenant sign for that is the Sabbath, the resting of the 7 days. You know, that's the very first time that you heard about it. Before anything else, the origin of the Sabbath can be traced back to that point. God rested on the 7th day. It was a holy day, a day spent in love, a day spent to grow in relationship with God. Sabbath is not only quitting work and sitting down and sipping, hot tea and watching TV. That's not Sabbath. Is growing with God. It is forging and making strong that relationship that they have. But then, man is weak. There is the fall of Adam and the expulsion from the Garden of Eden. God made an oath, a promise, that He would not forget, because He already made a covenant for them. I will take care of you. The covenant is God and man. I will take care. God takes care of man. Man has to be obedient to God. And they committed a mistake right away. They ate the apple, which is a symbolism of disobedience. They listened more to themselves than to God. And that was such a breach of that covenant. And God made a promise. When you look at the promise, to whom was the promise being addressed to? Read it again.
Serpent. To the serpent.
And serpent is the devil. I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise, I think it's her heel. Okay, it's a wrong thing there. Look, I know you're familiar with some of the images of the Blessed Mother Mary. This is just a teaser. We can do one afternoon about discussing this one. But look at all the images of the Blessed Mother Mary with the serpent underneath. Okay? The Blessed Mother is the prefigurement of that woman, the new Eve. And it was her who's stepping on the head of the serpent. And it's an act of total victory over someone. And the serpent futilely trying to strike her heel as a sign of defiance. But even though that defiance leads to defeat, and God said light. No, I'm sorry, it's light. But look at that. That's just one of those things. But when we go now to the covenant part of the first covenant, we see there how God never forgets his covenant. He never forgets his part. Even though man has sinned, God never backs off from his responsibility. But then, because of the fall, then they all have the original sin that we all were passed on to us. This is the definition of the covenant. A covenant is a solemn agreement that are an exchange of mutual promises forever. It unites the participant in a family relationship. It's not a temporary agreement like a contract that you can say, I think I'm not good now. I'll send you a notice that I am getting away from the contract, and if you sign it, we're good. No, that's not the covenant. Okay? So this is the first covenant. There's the Adam and Eve, and the structure is marriage, or holy couple or marriage. And the covenant role is as a husband and as a wife. And the covenant sign is Sabbath. So that's the first one. Now the second one now, let's go. We will conclude each particular covenant with these beautiful words. This is our story, both yours and mine, now and forever. Now, here's the second part. Also very interesting story. That's the second period. It happened probably in 2500 BC. And here is Noah. Now, they already propagated the land, but still man hasn't learned because he's young. You know, he commits mistakes, and then God decided that, well, let's do something about it. You've been committing a lot of mistakes already, so let's... God wanted to be able to start. Now, he wanted to save everyone. It wasn't like, okay, you're excluded. No, he wanted to save everyone. But it was only Noah in the household listened. They were all laughing at him. Remember that story? You know, it was in a nursery rhyme that we have. They're all laughing at Noah. Why are you building that big boat? You're building a big boat. You're crazy. they're just, this is a crazy guy. Why is he building such a big boat? It's in the middle of summer. It's not going to rain. It's not been raining for the longest time. He's building a big boat, and only when it rained, even when the first drop of rain, they were still laughing at him. Only when it's getting higher and higher, that's when they started, oh, we made a mistake. But then, that is the second covenant. You know, God is really a loving God. That when you look at the book of Genesis, whoever has written this part had shown the psychology of God. How it pained him. You know, he was the one who created everything, and now everything is destroyed. Everything kind of was washed away in the deluge, in the flood. And he was pained. So when they finally, the water receded, Noah and his household came out, then God gave them the sign, the covenant sign of the rainbow. And a promise again. Never do it again. Never do it again. So even at that early stage, you know, you see the maturity of God and the immaturity of man. God has been constant. That's one of the things that you have to realize in this story that I'm going to tell you. God is always and forever be constant. In the maturity, in the love. Never, you know, kind of shaking in that kind of his own love for all of us. And his constancy. The second covenant that is on Noah. Noah was called as the head of the household. So he was the covenant role of Noah in that covenant. This is a father. a father of a household that survived the flood. And the structure is his own family. And the sign is rainbow. So let's go back to the first one, first covenant. The mediator was Adam. In the second covenant, the mediator is Noah. In the first covenant, the covenant role of Adam was as a husband. The covenant role in the second column is Noah as a father. The structure is marriage. On Noah, it is the household, the community, his children, with his children. The covenant sign for the first, the sign of the agreement was the Sabbath, the observance of the Sabbath. And for Noah, the covenant sign of the agreement that reminds you that the covenant is there between God and man and Noah, it was the rainbow. You see that parallelism now that we have. I'm moving forward. Okay, so you see it there now. That is the three structures. This is our story. Both yours. You can repeat it with me. It's a good thing to wake us up. This is our story. Both yours and mine. Now and forever. Very good. Now, the third part, the third covenant. It's covenant between Abraham and God. A beautiful story of that, isn't it? He was a wandering Armenian. Am I pronouncing it right? Aramean. Aramean. Not an Armenian, but an Aramean. Okay, so those are two different ones, like you're saying from the north and the south. So they wouldn't agree with that. But anyway, he is and I recall that part because every Jew would have it in a written form, during the time of Jesus, and they carry it with them in a little box close to their chest. Yeah. To remind them of their origin, that they all came from Abraham. But anyway, we'll talk more about that. So the call of Abraham, God calls him from nowhere. From many choices, God called Abram. His name was not Abraham yet. His name was Abram, A-B-R-A-M. And that call was a call as a tribal leader. It's a tribal covenant. And that covenant that God has called to Abraham, there was a promise by God attached to it. He said, still, it reverberates the same old covenant. I will be your God. Okay? You, Abraham, from Ur, a nobody, I'm calling you to become the father of a nation. Go to the land that I will show you. That is in Genesis 11:26. And God promised that his descendants would be as many as the stars, or more than the sand. It's a beautiful thing that God has brought him all out there. And then he said to Abraham that I will bless you and all your descendants coming from you. But the interesting story about that is, they're already old. They're past their childbearing days. And the wife is a little bit also past the childbearing days. And you know already the story. They already got one son, Isaac. And then God wants them to offer their son in the mountain. How can it be? But he's the father of faith. Abraham. He represents all of us in that call. To trust God at all times. To always be listening to God and be able to be mindful and always remember that God never forgets. I will try to end my talk with this covenant. And then we're going to have a break. Let me finish this with saying that in about 5 minutes more, that Abraham was given this promise. 3 promises, a threefold blessing. And you can find this in Genesis, okay, 12, 2 to 3. Can somebody read that? Any volunteer? Okay, Gladys is a volunteer. Gladys, can you read it with a microphone?
I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and curse those who curse you. All the communities of the earth shall find blessing in you.
Thank you, Gladys. What a promise. If somebody does that to you, you would jump to the occasion. Yeah, sign me up. I want to be there. I want to be that guy. Because that's a forever promise. Okay, I have to pass that. That's a teaser. That's another story. It's a beautiful story too. That's where the history of the name Jerusalem came from. Yeah, now you're interested. Where did the story of Jerusalem or the name of the city came from? Melchizedek is coming from Salem. That's a teaser. I don't want to go there and to be distracted with everything. So, but anyway, let's go back to Abraham. The promise of God to Abraham is that he would be a nation. And also that his name, his dynasty would last forever. That he would bless every one of his descendants. It's a worldwide blessing. And all of this were fulfilled. If you can write down underneath it, the promise was to become a nation. It's stated by God in Genesis chapter 15. It was fulfilled in the Mosaic covenant, which we're going to talk in the next one. The promise that his name would last forever, that's the second promise, a dynasty, was given in Genesis chapter 17. It was fulfilled in the Davidic covenant, the next one that we will talk after the Mosaic covenant. And the worldwide blessing to all his descendants contained in Genesis 22, fulfilled in the covenant with Christ. We will end there, and we would have our lunch break.